Greetings, all new Hammer, Middle Hammer, and Old Hammer folks. I am OldGrumpyWolf, and welcome to the Minibar Podcast. I'll be serving you up lots of fun, nerdy painting nerdiness. I just screwed up my line talking to other painters from around the web. But before we get started, I want to plug thebaselayer.com. Thebaselayer.com is a social media website for posting your miniatures. It is all miniatures all the time, every day, all day. You can comment, you can follow, you can like. There's actually an upcoming, at the time of this recording, upcoming notifications thing coming up. There's no weird advertisements for things from China or other people's kids. It's just miniatures. So go sign up at the baselayer.com and start sharing your stuff for us to all look at. In the meantime, I have a very, very special guest on today. He was somebody I grew up heavily influenced by and idolizing. You guys might remember him from the 1990s Eavy Metal staff. He was the head of it, I believe, for a while. We have with us, if I can find my button, there we go. We have with us Dave Perry. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hey, Lennon. Great to be on. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, man. It's an absolute honor to have you on. Like for a lot of us that we're really into painting in the 90s and that really grew up in the 90s, seeing your work in White Dwarf was, very, very common. And, like you had such a clean style to your models. I mean, you were one of the top painters there easily.
Oh, thank you. Maybe for a time. I think I was surrounded by far more talented people that enabled me to maintain my position.
Well, the thing I found about, being in creative environments like that is, the people around you, they tend to inspire you and tend to, you just naturally progress and get better because it's just like so much, positivity and creative energy around you. I sound totally like a tree hugging hippie. I don't care.
No, I agree. It was a great team. I mean, there were some real characters and some real talents. It was a pretty impressive time to be there.
So just to let people know where you are, I mean, you're from England, but where are you in the world?
Yeah, so I'm based in Tokyo. I've been a resident of Japan for over 20 years now. So yeah.
Oh, okay. What got you to move over there? I mean, that's a bit of a haul.
Yeah, sure. It's strangely enough, it's connected vaguely to my workshop past. For a little while in between jobs, I was actually living with Jez Goodwin.
Oh, really?
On his, in the spare, and in the spare bedroom at his place, they had the novel Shogun on the bookshelf. And one night I tucked into that, and I was like, "Well, Japan sounds pretty awesome," and that was a rabbit hole that I've never climbed out of. Basically. Yeah, so I got interested, went back to uni, learned Japanese, and then moved out here.
Oh, wow!
Here I am.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, Japanese isn't easy to learn, especially if you're not using it on a daily basis, or in the culture itself.
Right. Sure.
I think
it's a great place to live.
I think you might know him, the Crown of Command.
Yeah, sure, Josh. Yeah.
Josh.
Yeah. So we actually work together at the studio. Yeah.
Oh, really?
And yeah, we see each other. Okay. Yeah. He came whilst I was still there. I believe he was down in one of the London stores, and he got sent up to the studio for maybe 6 months. He was a great guy. And then, this is years ago now though, but probably 16 years ago or something, he emailed out the blue saying, "Hey, are you Dave Perry that I used to work with? I'm also here in Japan, blah, blah, blah." So it was just one of those strange things that we both ended up here.
Nice. Yeah, I like Josh. He's a really cool guy. I like him and I get along really well.
It's a great guy.
Splatter Natter show, and I had him on... his episode is the last episode from this season, or from season 1, and it was
sure. I listened to it.
Yeah, he's just fun to talk to.
He's great.
And
he's fun, and also his painting is just I really admire his ability just to mimic that kind of mid-90s painting style. Yeah, and he does it so quickly. The fact that he can churn out armies, but it looks fantastic.
Yeah, that he manages to get everything looking very grim bright like the 90s. So, but to dive into it, because I've got some questions for you I want to chat about. Just to dive into it, the thing I always open the show with is what got you into the hobby of miniature painting?
Good. Wow, good question, I guess. Okay, so if we go all the way back, I was born in the late 70s, very late 70s. And so growing up, from a very early age, I remember my parents taking me to see Return of the Jedi at the cinema. So
nice.
That was probably, 86 or something. But, so Star Wars was always there. From a young age, it was that kind of influence that, hey, you like science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
There were also, I guess, other kind of things happening at a very young age. In the UK, we had the fighting fantasy books by Jackson and Livingstone. And so they were there. There was other things going on, Choose Your Own Adventures books, Lone Wolf books, sorry. But there was no connection to toy soldiers at that point. However, that was there in the background, okay? So that's there. It's bubbling under in terms of your interests and what turns you on or whatever. Then along came things like Transformers, He-Man. So but it's still there. It's robots in disguise. It's not vastly different from what goes on in Star Wars or even Warhammer, okay? It's still sci-fi. So then eventually, that's all there. That's all happening, but it's still not a big part of my life. Then Lord of the Rings comes in. You try reading it at a young age, you don't half grasp what's going on, but you're kind of interested. It's kind of
The
cool.
size of that book is like War and Peace, man. It's like this big.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And don't forget, there was also the Ralph Bakshi cartoon of the Lord of the Rings. So that had been aired a couple of times.
Yeah.
Remember, this is really, things got aired occasionally. So unless you had a VHS and you happened to be able to record them, you saw things only occasionally. And back then, like Star Wars was on like once a decade or something.
Yeah.
National TV or whatever. So you didn't have access to all this stuff all the time. But it's in the back of your mind, I remember seeing this cartoon, Lord of the Rings, blah, blah, blah. There was another fantasy thing called Flight of Dragons, which was really cool. But again, dragons, So that's all bubbling under. And then one day at school, and I guess it must have been around, I want to say 87 maybe, we used to have these things called play days, and like kids, it was a day off class basically, and kids were bringing board games or their soccer sticker albums or whatever, trading cards. Anyway, one of the kids, and I still remember his name was Luke Emery. He brought in his big brother's box of toy soldiers, and it was just a box of lead. Okay, it was just a box of badly painted or unpainted lead. There were elves and goblins and dwarves and God knows what else. And we were like moving them around the table, but somehow I connected. Jesus, this is that Lord of the Rings stuff. This is a goblin. This is an orc. This is an elf. And I was just absolutely mesmerized. I was like, oh my God, these things are incredible. That's happening. I mean, it's just blown away. I think this is what happens for many people, and especially for those who really get hit with the miniature bug and painting bug rather than the gaming bug. It's something about the miniatures themselves that, it just, for some reason, it triggers something deep down, and you're just like, wow, these are just gems. They're brilliant. They're treasure. That then led to, all of a sudden, all these bizarre repressed memories started bubbling up. And I was like, wow, various trips with my parents, say, down to London, and you'd gone to department stores and the hobby sections. When we say hobby, it would be the board game sections. Used to have box sets. It would have been like Regiments of Renown. And I can always remember seeing things like the Skull Crusher or the Goblin Chariot and not really understanding what it was, but picking them up and looking at them and being amazed by the cover art, which was the painted models. And somehow understanding that linked to the final fighting fantasy books, because the cover art and the miniatures are very similar. So that was all there. And then once I'd seen the miniatures at this school play day, that was it. And it started off with just buying miniatures and grabbing miniatures from anybody. Then eventually I got White Dwarf. I think my first issue was 109. And from there, it just spiraled. Okay. Now, but to put the painting thing in context, sorry, it's a long answer.
Oh, you're good.
But I did early on get the hardback copy of Warhammer 3, Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Yeah. And of course, in there, it's got those incredible battlefield shots, the amazing terrain, big, rank and flank units. And I was just like, my God, this is awesome. But to be honest, I was a bit too young to really take it on board. And it was just, I was just too into getting the figures and painting them, and painting them very badly. What changed everything was the release of Adeptus Titanicus. Myself and a school friend purchased that, and all of a sudden we could actually understand the rules. We knew how to play. You had everything you needed in a box, and once you played that, all of a sudden that opened up. Well, actually playing games isn't so daunting, and of course that segued into not just being into fantasy because it was Tolkien based, but sci-fi is cool. And then when I saw my first Space Marines, which was the plastic beaky Marines, of course, I was like, oh my God, I've got to do these as well.
RCBO ones are the best Marines ever made.
Yeah, exactly.
Hang on, hang on.
I think,
I moved it. I don't know where I put it. I have my Adeptus Titanicus rule book. I was going to...
Oh, okay. Fantastic. great.
I figured it'd give you a trip down memory lane, but I moved it. I don't know where I put it. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, I just think Adeptus Titanicus was great. It was fun to play, but also the miniatures were interesting.
Was it the hold on? Was it the Adeptus Titanicus? They had the metal Titans in it, where like on the back inside cover, you had the diorama of the Ultramarines crawling up the leg.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
that's the
it always came with those plastic Titans.
Yeah,
and even from that early stage, that was interesting, and there was the mythology around Citadel Miniatures and Workshop. So you were looking at White Dwarf and realizing, well, the Titans in White Dwarf don't look like the ones we get in the box.
Yeah,
what's going on? What's this? They have like special stuff, So that just added to the mystery and the desire to know more and to be on the inside one day.
Those metal Titans that were in the original Adeptus Titanicus, it took me forever to figure out the story behind those. Like, I mean, it was in the last couple of years that I figured it out, but I remember seeing those and like getting the plastic ones and being so disappointed that like they were different. And I always wanted the metal ones, and they never made them. So I took it upon myself. I think it was like last year. I hunted down one. It wasn't. I don't know if Jess was involved. There was 2 miniature sculptors for him. And I hunted down the second one, and he told me about the history of those metal miniatures, because I've seen them in the wild. There's a handful that leaked from the studio, and those metal miniatures were created specifically for photography. Like they sculpted them up. They were a multi-piece kit. They didn't have the plastics ready at the time of publishing the rule book, so they needed something in the rule book to represent the Titans. So they cast up 16 metal Titans. They sculpted them and casted them, and then did all the product photography, and then those just lived in the archive for like ever. They never really broke them out for anything. And when the plastics were ready, they started photographing those. And then the second, I think it was a hardbound book, the second Adeptus Titanicus book, I believe they got rid of all the metal Titan pictures and put just nothing but the plastics in, because the Eavy Metal staff had gotten them all painted by then. And I skipped forward. There was 16 of them cast up. Between 4 to 6 of them were smuggled out of the studio somehow. I've managed to find 4 of them. 2 of them reside here in the U.S. 1 resides in Europe, and 1 resides in Russia. And the rest of them that Brian took with that were still there now are with Foundry. Foundry usually has 2 or 3 of them sitting in their cases. And it's like, to me,
they were great models.
Those miniatures, I don't know why, they were my unicorn, because they never produced them. I thought they were the coolest looking Titans ever, and I just took it upon myself.
They still are, to be honest.
Well, I thought about like either seeing if I could get Foundry to send me one so I could 3D scan it and then break it apart in 3D so make it a printable file, or just see if I can get Foundry to let me take straight full shots, side shots, top down shots, and then model it in Blender, and then actually make it a kit again, for people like us who adore those models, who have never gotten to lay hand or paint on them.
Sure. It was great size as well. I know these days the Titans and Scouts, whatever, are huge, aren't they? But I really like that scale. It was just right. It's a sweet spot. I was
I was at a local hobby shop on this past Saturday, and I bought some of the new Epic Scale Marines, and I was like I was holding the box of the new Titan, and I'm just like, I can't justify spending $110 on this thing, man.
Yeah, it's not cheap, is it? And also, to be honest, just painting the things, it's just so daunting. You can look at it. For example,
overly detailed.
I've got a few. Exactly. I mean, this is a big problem with the newer stuff, but even just the size and complexity and how beautiful the models are. It's just a bit off-putting, which is kind of interesting, to be an ex-painter and say that, but it's true. You just look at it and go, wow, where would I start? Like, can I do it justice?
Yeah, well, it's. Well, I was just talking about this last night with my last guest. I feel bad for a lot of people getting into the hobby now, because things have become so overly detailed and so precise. Like the biggest thing that still irks me to this day, like about all the modern Space Marines, I hate the size of the rivets. They are so small. Now you grew up painting, or you were at Eavy Metal and painting this stuff like around when I was a kid too. So like the size, the size of the rivets on the bolters, the size of the rivets on the backpacks, just the size of the rivets on Space Marines. They were easily paintable. Now it's like, they're like a quarter of the size. It's like, this is not fun anymore. And then those those epic Space Marines I bought on the dreadnoughts, they actually have rivets on the dreadnoughts. Before I paint those, I'm just going to scrape them off.
Yeah. It's difficult. I mean, I think the quality of the miniatures, of Citadel miniatures today, I mean, obviously it's incredible. That they're absolutely fantastic. The dynamism, some of the empty space stuff they can do now, it's just brilliant. However, they are over detailed, and in some cases they're just too fine. Yeah, which is actually strangely Citadel miniatures like, if you think what Citadel used to be about. It was quite chunky and all the rest of it. And some of the miniatures, like I quite like Warcry, and I've painted a few Warcry figures, and sometimes they're just way too fiddly and too fine and breakable. And I find that quite annoying. And I think if you'd grown up to the 90s and 2000s with Citadel miniatures in lead, obviously we were used to, for casting purposes, they were all done on a plane, so there'd be no undercuts or no empty spaces, which actually made painting a lot quicker and easier. Whereas these days, you literally have to paint everything. Everything has got a front, back, and side, because you can literally go 360 around it, whereas in the old days, it was kind of flat. So, yeah, it's a very different beast, I think, in terms of modeling and painting. Now.
Well, you're talking about kind of how dainty they are. Like, as much as I like the new Saint Celestine, like she's just a really special model to me. The new one, dude, you look at her and she just falls over. She weighs nothing.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah, like I painted up the original one for a painting competition here in town back in the late 2000s, and I've still got her, unfortunately. And you're actually a good person to talk to about this. The old when Citadel brought out the matte clear coat here in the United States in the 2000s, I was ecstatic, because I'd grown up using Raul Partha's gloss coat, and Citadel's clear coat from the 2000s was not archival quality. And it's yellowed on every single one of my miniatures I used it on. So, like, all of my competition pieces from the 2000s are ruined. Most of my Space Wolf, second edition Space Wolf armies ruined. I mean, it's not that big a deal, because I can just repaint them, but it's kind of frustrating. And when I was moving house, when I bought the house I'm in now, one of my storage boxes where all my competition minis were, it got bonked pretty hard, and she shattered. I mean, she weighed a ton, but she got shattered, so I'm gonna strip her and repaint her eventually. It's on the list of to-do for like the next 2 years.
I'm guessing you have a pretty big to-do list.
Dude, we all do. My pile of shame is contained in a box, like a giant Tupperware storage box next to my painting desk, so I don't actually have to look at the pile. I just know it's in there. Sure.
I mean, strangely enough, I actually sort of dropped out of the hobby, as we now call it, but I dropped out of painting and gaming for a long time. And I got back into it, I guess it was probably the back end of 2019.
Oh, okay.
Just before COVID, I guess. And so it was interesting that when I got back into it, I sort of thought to myself, okay, I'm going to be a lot more selective about what I do. I'm going to, decide on a project, I'm going to see it through till its end, then I'll do the next thing, and I'm going to limit the amount of games. And of course, that goes out the window very quickly. Before you know it, you're like, oh, I like this one and this one, and what about this game? And all these figures look cool. And you're just back to where you used to be as a kid, which is ridiculous, really. So then, all boxes of lead, boxes of plastic everywhere that will never be touched.
Well, for Christmas, my gal's son, God bless him, he bought me one of the new, Space Wolf guys. He's got a sword and a shield, and I'm just like, crap, now I got something else to paint. I'll get to it eventually. It's a neat looking model, but I'm just like, I still got to do Logan Grimnar. I got to do the new the new Wolf Priest. Plus, I got to do my entries for this year. Plus, I have to do my tutorials. Plus, I have to do the models for my tutorials. And the list just it doesn't help. Exactly. I mean, it doesn't help that like October till like mid-December, I'm just painting Christmas gifts. So there's like 2.5 months gone.
What do you think of the Space Wolves? I was literally the other day. I mean, they're generally beautiful. And that new box that they did, I think, great. I'm like, wow, this stuff looks so cool. But then I saw, and I don't know if they're new or from a few years ago, but these kind of half wolf man type Space Wolves.
Oh, the Wolfen?
They've got. I guess so, yeah. And I was just like, what is this? This just looks so bad. It doesn't even feel like...
I'm not a fan of the Wolfen. I think they look a little silly, but that's just me. And I don't game, so I don't care. It's like if I don't like a model, I don't have to, if it's like a really bad looking librarian, I don't have to use it because I'm not building an army. I can just go get the really cool looking one.
I mean,
like the 2000s.
I think there's... yeah, quite. So I think that there are some occasional releases where, it's a bit, okay, that doesn't quite hit right. But overall, I think stuff, it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing was like just you mentioning Jess. Like you're actually the second guest this season that was actually kind of close to Jess. I had Mark Gibbons on 3 episodes ago, and
okay.
We were talking about Jess a little bit after the show and whatnot. And he's one I'd love to talk to on the show, but for reasons I can't get into, I can't bring him on right now. But moving on with everything. Actually, you know what? I actually know what I already want to ask. How did you come to work over at Games Workshop?
Oh, okay. So, as I already mentioned, I was really into my painting, my gaming. I was obsessed, basically, like to the detriment of my education and my personal life, social life. All I wanted to do was paint toy soldiers, so that's all I did, basically. Paint. Played a few games. And I was obsessed, and very early on I decided I was going to work at a studio as an heavy metal painter. That was just all I wanted to do. I was very young. I was probably about 12 when I made that decision. So this is it. I think the turning point that had kind of put me in that mind frame, and I can't remember which issue of Dwarf it was, but there was a stage-by-stage how to paint the Blood Angel Terminator Captain that Mike did. And I remember I was at my grandmother's house.
Oh, you're talking about the old RTB09?
Yeah, so the metal box set.
Yeah.
It's the original Terminator box set. And it had the Terminator Captain with no helmet.
Yeah.
And I got hold of that. And in a White Dwarf, there was a stage-by-stage how to paint it that Mike had done. And I was like, right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to really follow this. I'm going to do exactly what it says and see what happens. And I did that, and it was literally the best thing I'd ever painted at the time. These days it would look pretty awful, but it actually had highlights and it had shading, and it was kind of in the lines, and his eyes were in his eyes and not halfway down his cheeks or whatever. And I was like, my God, I could do this. And from that point on, I think that really just something clicked. I understood the basics, and from there, that it just snowballed, and I became obsessed with painting to the point that I very rarely finished miniatures. I know it sounds silly. But you'd be, for example, you'd be painting a Space Marine because it was the latest Space Marine release. And you're like, okay, I'm bored of that now because White Dwarf just had some amazing Minotaur figure and the skin tones. I want to try that. So then I'd buy the Minotaur, but then, now I want to try this. So it was just rushing around the ranges, being turned on by whatever happened to be in Dwarf that month. And especially certain artists. So, you'd see, for example, Andy Craig did these really pastel-y Blood Bowl pieces like Luke Ripalm or something. I was like, I've got to try that because I've never thought about doing pastel tones before. And it was just desperately trying all these things. And of course, gradually the painting got better and better until you start getting noticed at your local club, or then you go to your local workshop store and they're like, wow, can we put some in the cabinet and all the rest of it. Of course, whenever in Nottingham, Birmingham or Coventry, once it opened, when the heavy metal guys used to come and do their little tours, you'd go and see, oh wow, so I could go and see Tim Prow at the Nottingham store painting.
Oh, you're so lucky you got to see that stuff.
It was awesome. I mean, they were like rock stars for us. So you imagine you're a teenage boy, so all of them, these are guys with like leather jackets, long hair, pierced ears, you're like, oh my God, one day I'm going to grow up to be like these guys. It's like so cool. It's like, they were like Glenn Danzig level cool back then, It's like, and of course you wanted part of that. You wanted in on it,
Yeah.
So, but it was cool. And I was also very lucky in that my closest store before Coventry opened was Birmingham. And one of the store staff at Birmingham was a guy called Stuart Willis. And he was a fantastic painter. And he actually did stints at the studio occasionally. And he was an excellent painter. And so I was lucky that I could kind of get tips from him. When Coventry opened, there was some people running that, but eventually a guy called Richard Gunson ended up being the manager there, and he was friends with Stuart. He was an awesome painter. Richard had his Undead Army featured in Dwarf during that sort of... It wasn't so long after the Andy Chambers Skaven army, so it was that pre-Warhammer 4 era.
Okay.
But Richard was a big influence in that he was a really good painter. He kind of helped me on, and because he had that contact with the studio, he was like, look, it's not impossible. We can actually start sending your figures in. And I remember I was still at school, but they're getting closer to the end of high school, and we just kept applying. We just kept sending my models, getting rejected. You're too young. And eventually, and I was only 16 when I got my interview, but I eventually got the interview, went up to Nottingham with my case of figures, had an interview with Alan Merritt, who was the studio manager at the time. And, it was just a dream come true. It was the studio. I mean, it was literally, it's Avalon, isn't it? It's like, oh my God, this place is real. It was so cool. And that was it. So I think it was January 94 I started.
Okay. So you were like 18 in 94?
No, 16.
Oh, okay. So 94, you were 16. You're only like 2 or 3 years older than I am.
Yeah, I guess so.
I just turned 44 last week.
Oh, congratulations! Happy birthday!
Oh yeah, they're all great now.
I try to forget them these days.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Next year, I can't talk. January next year. Oh, it's all downhill from there. I'm just like, great, awesome.
Oh, cheers.
My gal, she's a couple years older than I am, and she's just like, I remember 44 like it was yesterday. And I was like, Pepper, we were dating when you were 44. No, it's hearing just how you can work at workshop and just like your experiences getting into this stuff is so much like mine. I remember I used to sit around in like junior high and high school and like just daydream about working as a painter for a workshop. And obviously that couldn't happen because being in America, I think most everybody in the GW staff or the Eavy Metal staff was from Europe. But yeah, I got my copy of Adeptus Titanicus and Space Marine when I was like 11. I was like in 6th grade, and I got them accidentally in a comic book trade, and I was just obsessed with the. I didn't understand what the book was. I'd never seen a rule book for a role playing game, but I was obsessed with the miniatures and with the artwork, and it was so cool at the time because there was nothing like it. And I mean, like the whole grim dark future thing is fairly common in sci-fi now, but back then there was nothing like it, and. I was obsessing over this, and I was talking to my mom, who's British, and she ended up finding us a local store in Vegas that carried the models, and it was just all downhill from there. I got my first paints, my first models. It was first boxes of models were the 6 Adeptus Titanicus plastic miniatures, and then a box of rhinos and 200 sneaky beakies, and then I think my first 40K box was the original Ultramarines Assault Squad, and it's just been a lifelong thing, and just like obsessing over painting. I can completely understand that because it just becomes like a lifestyle. And like with you in the 90s being over in the UK, like I'm actually very, very jealous of envious of the situation because you like you just said, you got to see Tim and all the original heavy metal guys, see their models up close, see them painting. And here in Vegas, it was like in America at the time, especially, it was very, very underground, unless you went to that one hobby store, 1 or 2 hobby stores that carried Games Workshop stuff. And, you knew they had 40K stuff going on. You never heard of it outside of that ever, period. And, you show your miniatures to people and they're like, whoa, what are those from? It's a game called Warhammer 40,000. And they're like, oh my God, I've never heard of it. And I'm flash forward to now when I met my gal, both of her kids were like, oh yeah, we know what 40K is. Yeah, the game Space Marine. And I love that game. I'm like, wow, this is cool. Yeah, like, actually, youngins know what this stuff is now. Even my gal, she ran a comic book shop with her ex-husband. She knew what 40K was. So
it's so true. I think that's a really important point you make. Actually, that back in the day, even especially late 80s, like Workshop and Warhammer, just fantasy gaming in general, whether it's role playing or war gaming or whatever tabletop gaming, painting miniatures, it wasn't mainstream. It was more niche than niche. It was such a small thing.
Well, D&D was barely over a decade old at that point.
Exactly. It was so niche, and it was just sort of long-haired weirdos did it, and hippies did it, and I think even the hippies didn't do it. It was just the weirdos. And getting into it was difficult. And of course, there was no internet. There was literally White Dwarf magazine. I think there was War Games Illustrated magazine, Dragon magazine. Mm-hmm. There were just these monthly magazines. It wasn't easy to network. You'd find like 1 or 2 other people into it. Mostly people weren't really into it. It's like, I've got a few lead figures that I bought somewhere. And, the only gamers you'd often meet would be old guys playing Napoleonics or whatever. And they didn't want to know. So it was very different from now, where it's this global thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows what it is. I guess most high schools, if you went to, probably like 70% of the guys play Warhammer now.
Yeah.
It's a thing. We have movie stars who do interviews and they're like, yeah, I'm a Warhammer gamer, and that's fine now. It's just completely normal. But back in the day, it wasn't. But it meant that it was, one, difficult to source information and even materials often, but also that the nicheness of it was like it was like a secret thing, wasn't it? It was like, oh, I'm into this thing and we own it, and it's kind of secret and no one really understands it, and it was cool. It was very much connected with other kind of what's the word, sub trends and genres. So again, like the rock music, the metal, a lot of biker stuff in there, especially in the UK. It was very much connected with these different subgroups or whatever, which just added to the cool, to be honest. It just added to like, one day, if I do this enough, one day you can move to Nottingham and be part of this world. And it's like, it was really intoxicating at the time.
Well, funny enough, the thought just popped into my mind where my gal and I went to high school here in town. It was one of the first magnet schools we had in Vegas, and it was Las Vegas Academy of Performing and Visual Arts. And funny thing is now she's the theater manager for both theaters there. She runs both theaters. But at the high school, you actually had to go audition to get in. And, as an art student, you had to put together a portfolio, and, like the tryout was the art teachers had a still life drawing set up that they had you sketch or draw, and then they would, in the back, they were sitting behind you and like on the other side of the room, and they were reviewing your portfolio and whatever else you brought in. And I brought a bunch of my Warhammer models with, and I remember turning around and looking at them as they were looking at the models, and they're like pointing at them, and I can hear one of them go, "Oh my god, this is so detailed and cool! Holy crap!" So I can credit Warhammer helping me get into my high school for an art major.
Sure.
And
sure. I actually did. In my second attempt at education, I briefly went back to art college, and I did the same thing. I took some painted and sculpted miniatures just because, I was like, well, this is as close to art as I do, but it was trying to show, look, I vaguely have some artistic bone in my body. But I think even that was like the second time around. The first time around, and again, it was something you heard all the time in the studio. There were so many people who had, after leaving school, had gone into art courses, whether it was A-level art or foundation art, as we called it in the UK. But were completely disenchanted with the experience. It's like, no, this isn't what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to paint Space Marines, or I want to draw Space Marines, or, And of course, as we were talking about back then, it was such a niche thing. There wasn't really any indicator that, hey, you can do this as a career and you can make money.
Yeah.
And then even for the people entering the studio, especially in the 80s and early 90s, there was no, that path wasn't there necessarily showing, hey, one day this is going to be like this global empire and you can have a great 40-year career doing this.
Oh, yeah, who knew?
It was exactly. But so many people were just like, well, I have a passion for this thing and I want to do it. And that's all that mattered.
I'm curious about. I've talked to 80 Wood and I've talked to Tim Prow before. And I think you knew both of them, but you came in after the Kirby buyout. And I'm curious as to what Eavy Metal was like for you guys in the studio after the buyout, because I think you started at, a couple years after the buyout. Tim was gone, but Mike was still there.
Yeah. So when I joined,
what was that like?
Oh, it was still awesome. I mean, again, the studio was incredible. It was the Castle Boulevard studio, which was a beautiful location and building. That was
the second location, right?
Yeah. So it was this gorgeous kind of open plan thing by Nottingham Castle at the time, which was 1994. It was very modern. It felt very corporate, but in a good way. Not soulless, but it felt like, wow, this is a real office building with real amenities and all the rest of it. But it lacked the kind of coolness and mythological thing that surrounded the old Enfield Chambers studio. Yeah, there weren't people smoking it. Well, Jez could still smoke in his office in the mid-90s. He had a separate office in a separate building. But anyway, there wasn't all this going on. There wasn't all the crazy shenanigans. And, you used to listen to the old stories and think, wow, Enfield Chambers must have been so cool. But it was still brilliant. And the figure cabinets were awesome. The terrain was fantastic. Of course, all of a sudden, you're in a situation where wow, I'm now working literally side by side with the people that were in White Dwarf every month. And you'd go for a coffee and a cigarette in the coffee room, and Andy Chambers would be in there making his roll-ups and smoking, and you're like, well, this is Andy Chambers' fam, but yeah, so yeah, so it was pretty awesome in that sense. But obviously, all the old collection had gone. Brian had taken all with him. 94 was still pretty early, and I'm trying to think how far we got. The Undead, so the Empire book was already out, the Dwarf book was already out, the Undead book was due out. I think the Skaven had been done as well.
Second edition.
And so I arrived. And that was, second edition of Warhammer, yeah. And in terms of 40k, Space Wolves was out. And so then when I joined...
That was 94?
The first things I painted were... Yeah, it was 94 when I joined. So the Space Wolves was already out, so... 94 when I joined, the first things I painted was an Elder Grav tank for the not Grav tank, the Elder las cannon Grav las.
Oh, okay,
thing.
Yeah.
And it was an old original Road Trader. It was just doing the repaint for it, and that was for the Elder Codex. And then there were a couple of new Elder Warlocks, and at Undead I did 2 Ghosts. I think probably in the first 2 or 3 weeks I was a blue Ghost and a red Ghost. So that was interesting. So. I'd come up being interested in heavy metal, to the late 80s, early 90s. So people like, obviously Mike, Tim were big influences. People like Dale Hurst, Ivan Bartley, these old school. So back then we used to say, it's golden era, and everything used to be brown, realistic and dark and, whatever. You arrive at the studio. Of course, things had already brightened up. Really, looking at the screen, really brightened up to, say, the style that you're painting in.
Yeah, Grimble.
And although that was great, there was a bit of pushback in that. It doesn't always work. So when I was asked to paint these 2 new Ghosts, I think they were Gary Morley sculpts, and I was told, do one bright red and one bright blue. Just like, are you kidding? Like, no, we're not kidding. Just do as you're told. You're like, oh, okay.
So did they actually hold on, when you actually were assigned stuff to paint for the shop? I can't talk for the studio. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. They actually kind of told you how to paint them before you painted them.
It depends on who you are and how long you've been there. So that was literally, I'd been there like 3 weeks or something. Okay. So yes, with the Ghosts, they were do it and if they hadn't, I would have done them like Ghosts. I would have done, whatever, sort of grey, white colour or whatever. But no, red and blue. But over time it changed, and you got more freedom as you improved in terms of quality, but also understanding of it. There's a sharp learning curve. You've been outside, and you're probably the best painter or one of the best painters in your circle, whether it's in your store or surrounding stores or a war games club. You're probably the best. You get to the studio and you realise you suck. Like you really do, because you've not seen the studio miniatures in the flesh, really. I mean, obviously at Games Day or stuff you have, but they're still behind cabinets. But when you actually see the studio collection, and you see these guys just knocking these things out every day, and you're like, wow, this stuff really is awesome. It's far better. The photography just doesn't do it justice, especially back then. So you realise, right, I'm basically starting from scratch again. And you're learning, the studio style, but you're also learning how to paint for the camera. You're learning how to paint at a reasonable rate. It wasn't crazy, but you had to sort of get some stuff done. And so it took a while to sort of, and I would say you literally, maybe for the first 2-3 months, you kind of regress. Your painting becomes worse than it was. I think because you're just a bit, what's happening? Can I do this? But then you get back on the horse, as it were, and you find your feet and you find your style. And so once that happens, you're not really overly told what to do. There were certain things, for example, like the Elder Codex or something, or a Marine Codex, they would be very clear ideas of, well, actually, these are the color schemes for this craft world or for this chapter.
Yeah, you got to use these colors,
badges, or there'd be stuff like that. Beyond that, there wasn't a lot of latitude. All the bases were Goblin Green at that point. There was just, there wasn't even a question. Originally, everything had to be undercoated white. I'd come in I was a big proponent of black undercoats, but that was frowned upon.
Yeah, I was going to mention something about that. I remember, I heard it or read it somewhere that you could no longer do panel lining, and you had to undercoat everything in white. Most people weren't allowed to work up from black base coats.
Originally, yeah, but that changed by I want to say 96, 97.
Yeah,
There was a definite...
when Gorka Morka came out, and the whole orc painting scheme really changed.
Yeah, I think there was so going back to just backtracking a little, what it was like, that era. So I'd come in, Mike was still there, but Mike was no longer attached to the heavy metal team. He was doing the painting guides, so he had his own little kind of area, and he had an assistant, and he was just painting the figures for that and writing those books. And so the heavy metal team, the head of the team was a guy called Neil Hodgson. There was Stuart Thomas, Mark, I've forgotten his surname. He's still at Workshop, I think. Mark Jones, who ended up being a terrain maker as well. Paul Muller, who ended up being a sculptor.
Yeah. Oh, Muller went to sculpting?
He's still a sculptor doing his own thing. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so he actually sculpted stuff for... I think he did some stuff for Gorka Morka. Maybe not. But yeah, he did, he was a sculptor for a while. He definitely did some Dark Elder. He did like the Succubus or Incubi or whatever they're called. I don't know. So
yeah, I remember seeing him in the heavy metal staff section of like a White Dwarf, and it was just like once. And I thought he was like the most clean cut looking guy ever. But yeah, he was only in there once, and then by a year later he was gone. I was curious where he went.
No, he was a painter for a while, but he was the first trainee miniature designer. So when they opened up the trainee miniature designing thing, he was the first guy to get that. Other people came in and out. So, for example, Josh came in for a little while. Kim Seiberg was brilliant. But originally it was just Neil Stewart, Paul, Mark, and myself. Mm-hmm. Tim had gone a year previously. I think Kev White, maybe it was like 9 months previously or something. There was a guy called Jay Tanner who briefly was there. So there was this small team, and the cabinets were still pretty much empty. And we were, Warhammer was being rolled out, 40k was being rolled out. Things like Necromunda came out, Gorka Morka. But I guess over time, I think there was once the team kind of really gelled a bit and we became very good at what we were doing, there started to be a bit of a pushback on just how bright things were getting. So I think it kind of went too far. Yeah. There was definitely a feeling that, okay, we need to pull it back a bit, and some of the artistic integrity is being lost. And again, the exact dates escape me, but there was a time when whatever year was the year that they decided to do the painting the masters or whatever it was called, where staff could enter and blah blah blah. There was for a couple of years before that, there had been a real, especially with Mike, there was a real sense and understanding, or maybe like a opening of eyes, that the quality of Golden Demon had really dropped. Painting had dropped. Painting was no longer central. The hobby was all about gaming, and in terms of the company, it was becoming very sales driven and very much about how can we just sell more miniatures. Yeah. The kind of cult of personality had been completely ripped away from the miniature painters. We were never featured in White Dwarf. Yeah. Whereas the White Dwarf team and the game design team were like constants. But there was a sense of, wait on, this is really dropping off. And then Mike was like, really championed the idea of the Masters or whatever it was called. It was called the Open, wasn't it? The Open competition, I think, that staff could enter. And he, if I believe, he actually ended up writing to a lot of old connections, so people like Dave Soper and Mick Beard and all these old painters.
Oh, I didn't know Mike knew Dave.
In the day, sort of Golden Demon entrance. Yeah, of course, because Mike was Mike, and anyone who entered Golden Demon, especially if you're winning Slayer swords, and he would have been invited to the studio. And,
okay. Yeah, I remember Dave's old Nurgle tank, and I think that thing was just mind blowing. And then a couple of years ago, he did another one that was just like, it just blew the original out of the water.
It was awesome, wasn't it?
Oh god, yeah, it took him like 2 years to build it, and like 3 months to paint it. It's like, God, Dave, how do you do that?
Yeah, totally. So that happened, and then that basically spurred things on. That really was a turnaround where all of a sudden there was this shift towards, let's really get painting back to where it used to be. Yeah. Let's focus on high quality. And then Mike did an entrance for that. It was the Catachan, female Catachan.
Yeah, the one holding the gun. I have that issue.
Yeah. And it was just gorgeous, And I think from then the Eavy Metal team kind of changed in that all of a sudden we were freed up a bit to be like, okay, let's just try and do the best we can and maybe not be quite so bright. People like Paul Muller, he went down this path of his own where he really started doing some quite dark, weird painting, very much influenced by Adrian Wild, who was the terrain guy. Also, Mark Jones did a lot of the original tanks. So when the Lehman Russ kit first came out, he was basically schooled how to paint it by Adrian Wild, because Adrian Wild was a proper treadhead, so he was really into proper tank kits or whatever. So he was basically telling Mark, well, this is how you paint tanks to look real. So all of a sudden the first Lehman Russ had kind of weathering and, you know, it looked pretty cool. Stuart Thomas got this thing in his head where he was like, okay, I'm going to paint plastic miniatures so that they look as good or better than metal miniatures.
Yeah, I remember that. So I remember that was a quote in one of the Eavy Metal things. Actually, I think it's that issue that I just pulled.
Yeah, and they were gorgeous. They were stunning, you know. And we started using, or some of us started using black undercoats. So basically everything loosened up a bit and it became a bit easier to take things in different directions. And, you know, as long as stuff looked great and stuff sold, I mean, yeah.
And how did you wind up as like the head of Eavy Metal?
Yeah, good question. I still wonder. I think it was just
I still wonder.
Literally, yeah, it was a case of, yeah. It was literally a case of, you know, the pecking order was in terms of when you entered, you know. So Neil was the head of the team.
Yeah, I remember Neil being the head of it for a while.
He moved on to I can't remember the term for it, like a graphic artist.
Oh, okay.
So doing like floor plans and you know, if there was an insert in White Dwarf that showed like a Space Marine shoulder pad or whatever, he'd be the guy who painted the picture as it were, or the floor plans or whatever. So he was off doing that. Mike came back into the Eavy Metal team for a little while the idea was that it was to kind of boost us up again. You know, 'cause he was coming back in and taking an interest. And I think it was after he'd finished the painting guides, there was a little space between that and them saying to him, right, you can go and spend the rest of your days doing these incredible dioramas. So he had kind of nothing to do, as it were. So it was like, oh, I'll just sit next to the Eavy Metal team again and be there as a source of inspiration. And that was really cool. But there was this little gap. We had different people had come in. So we had Kim Seiberg there, Richard Potter was there, Matt Parks was Golden Demon when it had come in. And there was basically this gap space where, okay, we need a head. And I was next in line, like in terms of how long I'd been there. But I was not necessarily the best behaved member of staff, I guess. So, you know, it was a bit up in the air, but my manager at the time was a guy called Simon Tiff, and he's like, look, do you want it? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. You know, like, why not? It would be great. And so I did it. And it was kind of a period of change in that we were really, we saw it as an opportunity to kind of do what we wanted to do at last. Because it was a bit of a break from the previous period. And so I remember getting the guys in the conference room and we're like, okay, this is our chance. We're going to change everything. From now on, no bright red spear staves. Spear staves are brown. You're going to have wood grain on them. Blah, 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 blah. And we did it. And the first army we did, under my new regime, as it were, was the High Elf Army book, the second version.
Oh, that's why they changed.
You know, so if you look at that army, it completely changes. All of a sudden, it looks much more realistic.
Yeah, that's when you guys, that was literally, I remember that when that came out, like, especially in White Dwarf, I was like, I remember seeing the wood that you guys did on the stabs and always like thinking like, wow, that looks so cool. I mean, it's like realistic, but it still has that like Eavy Metal style to it. But I was just this like instant drastic switch.
Totally. So it was still bright and clean, but it was more realistic. You know, there were lots of blues and turquoise off with the white. There were no bright red spear staffs, no red shield designs. It was, you know, much more realistic. From then on, everything carried on in that vein, whether it was Warhammer or 40k. Obviously, as you mentioned, Gorka Morka, things really became a lot more. Yeah,
I think in the same issue, you were painting. There's a small little snippet about you painting one of the big gun orcs. What's his name? Design.
Yeah, they were lovely. They were great. Yeah, Brian Nelson was the designer.
Yeah, I always like Brian Nelson was like I loved his style of orcs that he brought out, and like that changed. There's a whole article about how you painted the Great Unclean one.
That was the pinnacle of my career. Yeah.
Oh, that model was so badass when it came out, dude. Like I remember when I went. That was the summer I went to England. Yeah, the big gun orcs, and it talks. You and Brian Nelson talk about the sculpting and the painting of them. But I remember going to England that summer when that Great Unclean one came out, and like every single Games Workshop shop, I went to like 4 or 5 of them as we were putzing around England. Every single shop had like their best painter like on staff or that came to the shop painted one of those. It was in the display case. But I remember,
it was
I remember seeing yours. I was like, whoa, that thing is cool.
Thank you. Yeah. I think Brian Nelson arrived, and again, he was just like a bolt out of the blue, you know. Because, and don't get me, I will still to this day, my favorite designer is
who sculpted the Great and Clean one? Was that Trish?
It was Trish. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So in terms of the orcs, so Brian had arrived, and Brian was this like out of nowhere, this amazing sculptor who was basically better than everybody except Jez, basically. And his orcs were great. Remember, Kev Adams had been gone for a long time, so the twins had done some orcs, and Gary Morley had done some orcs, but they were just, you know, whatever.
They're very Kev Adams.
And Brian came in, exactly. But Brian came in and brought a whole new take to them. But still rooted in, you could still see the progression from what Kev had done to. But they were just awesome. They were beautiful figures. He had a really crisp style of sculpting.
Well, Kev Adams' style, like he actually in like 40K terms, he's really the one that made like the orcs look threatening to like Space Marines and stuff. Because like the Kev Adams style orcs were just like, you know, normal looking guys with pot bellies and a t-shirt and some jeans holding a bolter. Whereas when when the new ones got sculpted versus Kev Adams, I mean, they were just, it was like, oh no, I can see how these guys are a threat to Space Marines. Because they just like all of them were just yoked. Yeah.
Totally, they were fantastic. They were really good. Yeah, and then the again, it's all in that issue that you showed earlier. But the Trish's Great and Clean one, fabulous model. If you think at the time, it was huge. It was, they weren't really doing that. It was a very large model. These days, it looks small compared to
the new one's huge.
But back then, that was a large model and it was pretty heavy. So that again, it was a shift. You could argue maybe, I would say that a model like that was a kind of precursor to where we are today in terms of those larger models. Yeah. And then even Brian's Orc Shaman, because I painted that was a favourite piece. Mm-hmm. And there was something about that feels very similar to what happens with characters now, where they've got a real, it's hard to put a finger on it, they have an identity of their own. They're like, wow, these are seriously individual models that a lot of time and thought's gone into, instead of just being generic, oh, it's slightly taller or it's got a cloak, therefore it's a character. Yeah. You know. Yeah. Well,
just for anybody who's wondering, I keep referencing this old issue of White Dwarf. It's number 207. But looking at this issue, I have a question. Were you the one who painted the Escher gang?
No, that was Neil.
Okay, because you have it. There's an Escher model in your picture.
Oh no, that was just one I painted. For my own.
Yeah, it sucks that it sucks White Dwarf never back. That was back in the phase where they didn't give credit to the painters, so you had no idea who painted what. And then I started noticing in the 2000s, I inherited a whole like probably like 40 issues of White Dwarf in the 2000s and the early 10s from my painting bestie. And by the 2000s, they had actually started crediting the artists again or the painters again. And then by I started noticing toward the end of the 2000s, getting into the 10s, that started to drop off. And I think it was Mark Gibbons mentioned. He's like, yeah, Games Workshop, they've always just been up and down with it. Sometimes they'll do it for a couple of years and then they'll just stop completely. So you never know who did what. Yeah. And I think it's really insulting to discredit.
Yeah, totally. I think it was quite, these days, I don't want to say distressing, but it was a bone of contention when I joined that, you'd grown up idolizing the heavy metal team and all you wanted to do was be an heavy metal painter. Yeah. And you wanted the fame that came with it. And you got there and it was an era where they weren't putting the heavy metal team in White Dwarf, they weren't giving credits for painting, so you kind of felt a bit let down. It was like, this I'm not doing the thing I wanted to do fully. I'm getting like 75% of the deal, not the full thing. So, but once that opened up, it was okay.
So I'm curious, actually, just for a question for the actual show. I know that you grew up like me using old Citadel paints, but like, what paints do you use now for when you paint?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see my.
A little. I can kind of see.
It's a mixture. Yeah. It's a bit of a mixture of modern day Citadel color, Foundry, Vallejo game color. We've got some Army Painter in there. Basically, that's it. Citadel color's fine, and they're easy to get because we have plenty of Warhammer stores here in Tokyo. But,
I keep forgetting you're over in Tokyo.
You're not a fan either. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's it. And in brushes, generally Winsor and Newton. Am
I like the only painter in the world who still uses Citadel brushes?
Yeah, I do occasionally. I'm not a big fan.
Their small layer brush is like my favorite
way.
brush in the world because it's the same thing as the old detail brush from the 90s and 2000s. And I just I do 95% of my work with those things.
Yeah, I remember the red brushes. They were great. They were really nice.
I want to try the Winsor Newton brushes. The only problem is like there's no readily available shop that I know of in town that carries them, and people have recommended me trying better brushes, and I'm just like, I don't want to go spend like $60 on a brush set, like $70 on a brush set just to find out I don't like them. So like over the weekend I bought a couple of Vallejo brushes. They're actually kind of nice. I had to order the 2 smaller sizes I wanted off Amazon, so I'm looking forward to those coming. But it's a longer brush with a giant bulb. So you can actually really load the brush up, and it comes to an ultra fine tip. And I'm like, ooh, this is going to be fun.
Nice. I think most of my stuff I get from Amazon as well. So.
What do you like? So you grew up like same as me. You remember the old Citadel paints, the old formula. What do you think of like the new formula versus the old formula, especially with the modern acrylic medium they use?
Yeah. So it's the original Citadel color. So if we say there was the original red box set, and then there was the monster and the creature set, and eventually the Space Marine set and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
The reality is they were awful. They were terrible. They were so thin. They had very bad coverage. The colors weren't consistent, but that's what we grew up with. That's how we learned to paint.
Yeah.
So you have a soft spot for them. You know, there were certain colors that you love or whatever. Then when I joined, it was only shortly after that the next range came out.
The hex bottles.
Yep, and that was a good range. And then later on, we'd moved to the third studio by then. It was probably not long before I left, or a year or so before I left. There was the next range where it was black screw top hex bottles.
That was my favorite formula.
I struggled with them as well. They were especially the reds. They seemed too dull somehow.
That was when GW tried to go matte with everything.
Yes. So, and I think this was always a problem with paints. There was this: people wanted good coverage, but they wanted them to be reasonably matte. And I think probably with hindsight, what actually people were looking for was a kind of satin, where you wanted it still to glow, but not to be really shiny. You know? So it was somewhere in between. But coverage was always the issue, and especially, strangely enough, with red, because red was the color that you had to do most of your models in, and red was always the hard one. But then,
oddly enough, I haven't noticed I've noticed a little bit of difference in modern reds, but like what's on the screen, like Pro Acryl Pyro Red, it still works just like Blood Red did. I mean, red and yellow are always going to be a thin pigment. It's a warm color, so it's always going to be a thin pigment. And us growing up using Citadel paints, I just use the same methods that I used 30 years ago to paint red. You get a nice white undercoat and just put 2, 3, 4 really thinned out coats on to get a nice, good, solid red. And then if you somehow spill over a dark color to your red base coat, you just paint it white and then paint another coat of red on top of it. And the same goes for yellow. Yeah.
What we used to use at the studio, okay, and you've probably had guys talk about this already, but there was always this myth floating around, the studio doesn't use Citadel color, we don't use, and we did.
I've been told you guys used a mix of stuff.
Products, okay.
Is that
Maybe in later days when I was there, it was literally, it was all Citadel color. And the main reason was because, it was internal, you didn't have to pay for it. Like, you just you put orders into the factory and they just send more stuff over. So the only thing we did use that was different, Mike was a fan of, I don't know if you can see this, it's the, they were called Acrylic Artist Ink.
Oh yeah, I think Tim he was using that stuff at the same time too.
Yeah. And so these were really good, and we did get these in because they were better than the Citadel inks, especially the red. Basically, enabled you to do really good red tones. But apart from that, it was all Citadel. Maybe in later days they started bringing in other stuff, but there were other people. There were other influences. So, for example, this kind of ties back into the open category thing. Dave Andrews, who always seems to be under people's radar he was an incredible painter, absolutely amazing. But he had his own thing. He had more of an historical gaming painting style, but he was absolutely fantastic. And he used Vallejo, And Ali Morrison was a big fan of Vallejo as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we, talking to these guys, you sort of realise, there are other paints, there's other ways to paint, there's other styles out there. But yeah, it was mostly Citadel. I think now, going back to your original question, I think the quality's great, they're good quality, but the pots suck.
Yeah.
The volume in each pot sucks.
I have a hard time. Like, I find that like the modern Citadel paints, they're kind of all over the place, like as far as like pigmentation and coverage, and I was just never able to get my head around using modern Citadel paints with the acrylic medium that's in them now. That weird, like it's like a clear gel almost, and like I think the only 3 colors I really use paint layer wise from Citadel anymore is Aerial Yellow, which I'm going to replace with Pro Acryl. I've got a bottle of Pro Acryl sitting in my paint collection. Doom Bull Brown for my base rims, and then Elysian Green for the tops on my bases before I flock them. But like even doing the base rims of Doom Bull Brown is so fickle. It takes me like 3 or 4 coats where I have a comparable color from AK and I water it down a little bit, and it's like a coat, maybe a coat and a half, and that's it. It's just done.
Sure.
So that whole new acrylic medium thing is just like, I'm like, I can't do this. I cannot figure out how to layer glaze with them either.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, I'm assuming you're the same, that over time you end up with your core set of favorite colors or paints, and you stick to that for almost everything.
Yeah, mine's all over the place like yours. I use AK Pro Acryl, Army Painter, War Painter, Citadel, and Vallejo. But the great thing is now, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is just the sheer volume of brands that we can choose from now, and every single brand is different. Like the behavior of the paints is different. It's so great, because if you find a blue from Citadel you like, but you don't like the way it acts, you can go find the same blue from 2 other brands, and it's 2 completely different behaviors. And you might find that War Painter works better for this, AK works better for that, Pro Acryl works better for this, Citadel works better for that. Like, I still love Citadel's metallics and their contrast paints. The Citadel metallics now still work very similarly to the Citadel metallics we grew up with. And then the contrast paints, they're so rich in pigment that you just add water to bring them down to the opacity of the wash that you want. It's really neat, as opposed to, I've tried some washes from other brands and they're just really thin. Like, the coverage on them sucks. Whereas the contrast paints, like, it's all like, there's not Black Legion, I forgot what it is. It's one of the black washes. It's almost like the old Armor wash from the 90s, and it's so rich in pigment, and I can water it down to whatever I want. Just a really nice light black shading. Done. I'm not going to use Nolan oil because there's just way too much medium in it.
I think again though, it goes back to this the fact that there's so much more availability of materials and sources now. So you have all these different paint ranges, you have all these different brush ranges. They're easily accessible from anywhere in the world, basically, thanks to online shopping. It's just very different. So you're not tied down to a particular range and a particular price point, which is obviously an important factor for a lot of people. And similarly with miniatures. I mean, there's so much out there now. It's just far more vibrant, isn't it? There's literally almost limitless options for miniature collecting or painting or gaming. It's just incredible. And then also, I think this is something you've touched on, for example, with your interview with Josh, but Instagram, just the fact that you just literally endless scrolling opportunities for looking at beautifully painted miniatures and beautifully modeled miniatures and converted miniatures, and in different styles. I think it's just incredible. That was something we just didn't have. It's really opened up the painting hobby.
I hope the website that I plug, like I've been friends with the guy ever since he started it about over a year ago. I hope the base layer takes off, because it's a really novel idea. The whole site layout's just nice and clean. I'll visit it usually once a day and just scroll through what's in there, and it's just nice seeing nothing but miniatures. Like, Instagram is the central hub. Yeah, that's where I do a lot of business and whatnot, but my gripe with Instagram is the algorithm, because I'll get like 3 or 4 miniatures and then like 7 memes and then another 2 miniatures and maybe 10 more memes, and like by the time I've been kind of doom scrolling for a few minutes, all the miniatures are gone and it's just nothing but memes or advertisements. And I'm like, okay, I follow like 700 people. It is mathematically impossible for you to run out of miniatures to show me. As much as I love sending memes to my gal and we laugh about them, like, I want to scroll through Instagram and I want to see just nothing but miniatures. Come on. I know everybody's painting right now. I know everybody's posting pictures.
Yeah, it is true. It's true. There's I've not really looked. Obviously, I know Cool Mini or Not is still a thing. I mean, obviously, they're a company doing.
Oh well, I know
now,
they branched out and started doing like a shop and all kinds of stuff. I never kept up on it.
Well, they make games and miniatures, don't they? So they have ex-workshop artists working for them. I know Mike was involved, Adrian Smith was involved.
Oh, that's right. Mark brought that up.
Luminaries. So it's a thing, which is, again, it's interesting, isn't it? But how popular the actual uploading pictures of miniatures and people voting on them thing is, I'm not sure anymore. But I know in the early 2000s that was quite interesting.
I posted some of my stuff from the late 2000s on there.
Yeah, it's interesting how things change. When I first started looking at that, it's probably around the time Rackham was becoming popular, because there was a lot of Rackham stuff on there, and that was very different from workshop style. And I was like, wow, that looks awesome. And then there was a period, probably the mid 2000s. In the mid 2000s, I was back in education, and I was just freelancing, to bring money in. And by then, already people were sort of commenting on my figures, saying, "Oh, this is kind of boring. This just looks like 1990s workshop."
Yeah, I got a lot of that in the late 2000s.
Yeah, and because things moved on, especially, I think, again, looking at heavy metal or what Workshop was doing, a big milestone or a turning point was the Lord of the Rings range.
Oh yeah, that saved their butts.
Yeah, but also in terms of painting, they went hyper realistic on that. All of a sudden, it was like really dark. Let's make the paint jobs match the imagery in the movies.
Yeah.
So that, and of course, they adopted that quicker painting style and all the rest of it. But everything was much more brown, basically, and it was awesome. And I think from then, it became a lot easier then that anything that was done could go, okay, well, we can base it more on a more realistic kind of color scheme. Yeah. So when you get to where we are now, and I would say, the guy who kind of epitomizes it, really, I suppose, is Darren Latham these days. But that studio style. Oh,
Darren's like the modern McVeigh.
Yeah, totally. But what he's done, but he's kind of, I don't know how to describe it, because I had this argument with a guy in the Warhammer store here in Harajuku, and I was saying, well, the old style was much less about edge highlighting. And he was like, no, it wasn't. But even in the 90s, everything was just edge highlight. I was like, yeah, but not in the way it's done now. And what I meant by that is, back in the day, edge highlighting was a thing, but we didn't edge highlight every single edge.
Yeah.
It was edge highlighting where we considered the light would fall. We'd get extra edge highlighting.
Well, in a lot of ways, today, I will say something toward that. The photography wise, back in the 90s and even into the 2000s, just print wise too, it was kind of hard to tell exactly what you guys were doing, because the way the print media kind of blurred stuff out. And I was going to bring this up earlier, was I've found pictures that people post on Facebook when they go to Warhammer World and they go to the classic section and take pictures of like the stuff that was like the weird transition phase when Kirby bought the company, all the way up until modern stuff. But the 90s and 2000s things they take pictures of, especially the 90s, when it's not under optimal lighting, it doesn't look as perfect as it did in White Dwarf. But I'm also figuring out in White Dwarf and print medium at the time, the way the miniatures were photographed and then the way they were printed created like a natural kind of gradation or blur on the colors. So it was really hard to tell exactly what you guys were doing in the 90s as far as like edge highlighting, as far as like layer glazing and blending, because everything looked absolutely perfect. And then when I see these models on display that people take photos of at Warhammer World, you can see the imperfections. You can see that everything wasn't blended exactly perfectly. It looks basically, I'm like, wow, I guess maybe my models are on the same level as what they were doing in the 90s. But as a kid or as a youngin', you just constantly beat yourself up because what you see in White Dwarf looks absolutely perfect, like unobtainably perfect. And then when you finally get to see the miniatures under less than stellar lighting conditions or photography conditions, you're like, oh, cool. All right. Well, I guess I'm doing it right. So, but you're talking about the edge highlighting thing. It was hard to tell based upon what was shown in White Dwarf exactly what was going on with the miniatures. And it didn't help that all the miniatures were usually photographed at exact size. Whereas now you can, on Instagram, you can, pinch and zoom, and everything's so high resolution that you can, see right down to like the pixel of how it was painted.
Sure. I went to the last time I was at Warhammer World was probably 3 years ago. And as you mentioned, they still have a lot of old stuff on display. It is amazing that those paint jobs are still out there, that they still exist. And they don't look that bad, but compared to modern painting, they do look kind of crummy. But they've you have to remember, some of these things are like 30 years old now.
Yeah.
And the varnish has faded. The studio miniatures were used for gaming, for battle reports and games, so they've been handled countless times.
Oh, yeah.
So they got, so they're pretty grubby, a lot of them.
Well,
they're
I was
grubby,
asking AD about that. I was like, how often
and
did you have to have those models repainted? Because you guys were always touching them.
No, they're never repainted. Things got touched up.
Oh, rather, I'm sorry, touched up.
Went on. Yeah, things got chipped up, and
yeah.
A lot of the, again, going back, you were talking about varnish. Varnish was always it was just like a perennial issue, wasn't it? That varnish gradually got worse and worse, and you'd get the varnish that would turn kind of furry, and then you got the undercoats that would turn furry, and you ruin your models, all the rest of it. But when I joined the team, they had a particular varnish. It was actually for setting letters, typography.
Okay.
Back in the day before desktops, and it was fantastic. But it never quite. To say it didn't dry is not true, but it was always a bit tacky, and that really took a lot of dirt. So, for example, even when I joined, the Ultramarine Tactical Squad box set and some of the early Space Wolf stuff that Tim Prow had done was quite grubby. It had a lot of fingerprints and a lot of a brownness to it, where it's like, okay, too many people have been handling these.
Yeah.
And it was just that the varnish was picking up the dirt.
I think they used to call that workable
So, there were models like that. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
I used to use,
it was great originally, but
I used to use a spray like that on in college on my charcoal pieces and my pencil pieces. That when you're done with the section, just hit it with that. That way, it doesn't get smudged or smeared. And like when you were done with the whole piece, just spray it down. And I always remember it had it took forever to go away, but it did have a slight tack to it, and it was actually a matte coat.
Yes. Yeah. It's still an issue today. I mean, the cans of varnish or undercoat are so hit and miss still. I never find,
Well, I've been really surprised with the Munitorum varnish. Like, it's a satin. Like, if you know what you're doing with spray paint, you can make it go matte. But I've noticed that, like, when it collects in the crevices, it doesn't cloud. It just goes glossy. And like, if you want to get it matte, you just hold it like at the very end of the stream and just let it dust onto the miniature. Let it set for a couple minutes, and then get a nice soft brush and brush off whatever didn't stick, and do that like once or twice, and it turns pure matte. But the Munitorum, the only problem with Munitorum varnish, dude, it stinks for like weeks. It takes so long to outgas.
Yeah.
And I'm just praying that it's like actual like archival quality this time around versus the stuff that they had in the 2000s. I think it will be, but I've done so many miniatures in the last 2 years where I'm like, Games Workshop, if this turns yellow, we're going to have some words and they're not going to be pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's something I wonder about. I sold basically everything I'd had back in the day. I sold off, so I wonder what state it's in now. But you see a lot of guys online where things like lead rot are an issue, and people say, oh, my figures are disintegrating. And
I'm thankful that like, none of my miniatures have that. But I live in the middle of the desert.
True, and I think also if you're collecting mainly that mid-90s and onwards, where it's more of a tin alloy rather than the more lead-heavy stuff, the earlier figures. But yeah, you see a lot of that, and I wonder like what state a lot of those gorgeous old armies or collections are in these days.
No, I can't even imagine how many.
For example, when
you
see, well, quite a lot, but not crazy amounts. They've sold stuff off over time, but
yeah. I'm
thinking even when you see when Foundry have their bring out your lead sort of games day.
I want to go to Boyle so bad.
I know. I'd love to look at those cabinets, but when people post the pictures, it's like, wow, it's amazing that all those miniatures are still there, but they're showing their age. There's paint jobs in there that you remember being like the greatest painted miniatures you'd ever seen. And you look at them now and you're like, well, that's pretty ropey.
Well, like all the stuff that's in there from Tim, man, like that, his work has held up pretty damn well over the years. Yeah,
true. I think, especially the back end of Mike and Tim at the back end of that original workshop lineup, that Brian Ansell years, you could see that they were just on the cusp of coming to that new style. You can see that happening. But, other guys at that time weren't, so people like Ivan and Dale or whatever, they were still very much in that much more old school painting style.
Yeah.
But they were still awesome paint jobs from back then. But yeah, things were different. I remember Mike telling me back in the day, they were having to paint like 5 or 6 miniatures a day.
Yeah, well, yeah, Tim was saying he was knocking out like 35 miniatures a month. And I think they were like, it was only Mike and Tim for the better part of like 6 to 9 months while the transition happened. And Tim was knocking out like 30 to 35 models a month, and Mike was handling between like 8 to 10 character models a month. And that, like, Mike was just doing characters and Tim was doing infantry. I can't even imagine that, dude. I get like 1 or 2 done a week.
Exactly. I mean, it really did slow down. It got to the point, if it was just average figures, you do like 1 a day maybe. And I think like that Great and Clean one, I spent like 5 or 6 weeks.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, you got to, I mean, like working, you were probably 5 to 8 hours, 9 hours a day working on that thing.
Exactly.
At least a couple hundred hours into it, especially with all like the shading you did on it. I think it was nuts.
No, totally. Yeah, the reason I did it in that way was Wayne England had done the artwork for it. He'd done like a painting, and I don't know if you remember Wayne's work, but he had a very distinct style, and he had basically said, well, it's meant to look like a rotten apple.
Yeah.
So it's green, but there's reds in there and browns and oranges. And I was like, well, okay, well, that sounds really cool. I'm going to try and paint like that. So I started with I think it was almost like bilious green base color. And I was putting all these.
Oh, God, you actually said the magic 2 words. You're the only heavy metal painter I've talked to that knows what bilious green is.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, or whatever the equivalent was by then.
I think it turned into scorpion
green. But
green.
whatever their brightest green. Yeah, maybe, yeah. And I was putting all these reds and oranges and browns into it to sort of work it down. Mm-hmm. And then I was highlighting back up. And it took forever. And I think I did the one leg first, and it looked awesome. But I was like, oh my God, now I've got to do this for the rest of the model. Like,
so like, I quit. I'm going home. Bye.
Yeah, and I think you can actually see it if you look closely enough. The worst part of that paint job is the sword, and it's because that was like week 5, and I was just so done with that figure. I was like, I didn't even want to pick the damn thing up. And so by the time I got to the sword, I was just like, okay, just felt this out.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Like, oh God, there's like numerous competition figures where like I'll come down just to the last piece, and I'm like, I hate this model. I just want it done. I hate this model so much right now. Fortunately, the Lamartis that I did, I actually had fun with him the entire way through. It was the first competition piece where I was just hyped the whole way through. I was like, I can't wait to see this done. I can't wait to see it done. And when I got it done, I was like, yeah, I'm actually happy with this. Like, I know I could have done things a little bit differently, but I'm ready to, I'm ready to stick this on the competition table and have people look at it. Like, I'm happy with this. Whereas like when I got Ulrich Slayer done, I was like, I hate this model. I hate this model. I hate this model. And it sat in my case for like a month. And every time I walked by it, I just flipped it off.
What was your first paint job that you did where you actually thought, okay, well, I can do this. Like, I'm rocking. Like, this is pretty damn good. Not the one where you thought, okay, I can paint now. Because
are you talking about like just my whole 30-year history?
Yeah, there's surely. I think most painters have got there's the model where you kind of go, oh, I can kind of paint now. I get this, and it's acceptable, and you're not embarrassed. And most people go, okay, God, this guy can paint. But then there's whoa.
It was. Hold on. I'll edit this. I'll actually go dig it out. I know exactly where he is, and you'll know the exact model too. Okay. You'll know this.
Oh, okay. Deathwing Terminator. Yeah.
It was actually. It was it wasn't a Deathwing. It was the generic when they finally brought out the generic Terminator bodies. They had no insignia on them, but I just painted him as Deathwing. And then right after him, I did the Deathwing Captain.
Oh, show me. Okay, brilliant, fantastic.
I'll take some better pictures when we're done with the show. But those two, it was right after. There was a guy here in town by the name of Mark Garcia, and at my local hobby store that I used to go to, he used to put his models in the case and show off some of his stuff, and he painted up a squad of Deathwing Terminators. And at the time, I'm like, oh my bestie and I used to say it. People paint like the books, or like how the books look, referring to White Dwarf. I saw these things. I was like, oh my God, it's painted just like the books, just like I see in like White Dwarf and stuff. And I told my buddy Howard about it and brought him down to the shop. And he's like, oh my God, that's just like out of White Dwarf. And it took me a couple of months, but the owner of the shop, he finally got a hold of Mark, and Mark agreed to helped teach me how to paint a little bit better. And I did those two Deathwing right after Mark taught me how to paint better. So that was the defining moment, was like, I did those two and I'm like, oh my God, I think I finally get it. And then I tried to do Gahazgal Thrak and I screwed it all up. But it was from that point forward where things really kind of kicked off. And I actually did, right before those, I did I've got them right here. I've done three. I did three of these through high school, but I did, this was my very, very first Ragnar Blackmane.
Yeah.
And I hadn't quite gotten some of this, like, gotten it yet, it quotation marks, but I did him right before Mark helped me along. And so that was, I don't know, that was 8th grade, I think, for me. So I was 14, 15. And I'd been painting like for like 4 or 5 years before that. So there was like a lot of struggle. It was like 4 years before that. There was a lot of struggles initially, and especially, you know, I've talked about this with guests on other shows or other episodes, where painting now is so much different than it was back then as far as the available resources, and especially the fact that you can go on YouTube and see somebody paint the entire model from start to finish, see how they lay the paints down, see all their methods, see all their techniques. Versus, you know, when you and I were youngins, all we had was White Dwarf and the painting guides. So you'd have like these 3 or 4 models kind of in stages and the brief description below it, but you never saw the actual technique. And it was always kind of confusing because you never got to see the stage by stage process of laying the colors down.
Yeah, those guides were, they were an approximation of how to paint a figure, because showing it in 4 stages. Do you remember you'd have like the finished gorgeous Mike McVeigh paint job, and they would show these 3 stages, and you're like, there's no way that those 3 stages resulted in this. You know, it's like, it's not happening, is it?
There's this dumb meme that I see around. It's like how to draw a bird. First draw a circle, then draw another circle, then draw a triangle, then draw the rest of the bird. And that was basically, that's basically like the old painting guides. First base coat, then wash, and then this. It's like, Dad, how do you even, what?
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, but it's really interesting that you bring out the Ragnar model, because, again, we talk about painting a lot, but we forget that so much of painting was obviously dependent on the miniatures and the quality of the miniatures. Yeah. And there's waystones along the history of painting, or, you know, the progression of painting as an art form or as a hobby or whatever. And I remember distinctly when I'm trying to remember which came out first, whether it was Ragnar and Gazgal or whether it was Teclis and Tyrion.
I think Gazgal and Ragnar came out right around the same time.
Yeah, well, it was Yarrick, wasn't it? So sorry, you had Yarrick. Oh, Yarrick.
Yeah, I think he came out right around the same time too.
Yeah, but whichever came first, and I think there was this a leap in the miniatures. It was like, wow. But also a leap, like Mike obviously stepped up and was like, okay, these miniatures deserve a certain level of painting. Mm-hmm. And I think, actually, I do think it was Tyrion and Teclis first, because I've seen other interviews where people were talking about John Stallard when he saw them for the first time, saying, we're going to be able to sell these for like £5 each. Mm-hmm. Whereas up until then, you know, workshop figures were £1.50 for a lead figure or £1. And he was like, we can sell this elf wizard for £5. Mm-hmm. And that's why they put the red foam in. He said, all we need to do is we'll put red backing foam in so it looks a bit more special. And all of a sudden, we're selling toy soldiers for £5 a pop. And I think, so that, you know, the sculpting was a different level. It was just had gone from being awesome to like, okay, this is a whole new thing happening now. Mike rose to the occasion, and the painting was just like, you know, they were just completely different. Everything just accelerated from then on. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, there was Commissar Yarrick, and Kev Adams did the Gazgal figure. Then, of course, the Space Wolf range came out, and it was just like, wow, all of a sudden, just the quality of the figures, especially the character models, just went through the roof. The quality of painting that people like Mike and Tim could put into those miniatures was just, it was just incredible. And I think that spark again where you go, wow, look at the challenge now. And from then on, it was always the case that just as you thought you were catching up, like the next thing would come out and you were okay, starting all over again. Yeah.
Well, I talking to Mark and talking to a couple other people about Jess, you know, like I mean, that man was meant to do what he did, whatever. I know he just retired, but like looking at his designs from, actually it was last night, the show I did last night, which Midnight Ghoul, he's a buddy of mine here in town. We were talking about the modern Eldar, and I brought up Jess, and I was like, yeah, a lot of these modern Eldar miniatures, like especially the character models, they're not complete resculpts. They're just like minor updates to what Jess did back in like 30 years ago. Like, and Jess's, I mean, his Space Marine, his Mark 7 designs, you put those next to a modern Primaris and they still look better than the Primaris. I think Jess had a hand in sculpting the new Primaris models, but you know, his designs all the way back then still hold up now. They're like, a lot of them are just so timeless. They were so perfect. And, you know, even his drawn artwork it's neat to see his drawings go to miniatures because they're so very, very similar. But yeah, I mean, he hit the nail on the head with a lot of what he did. And he just like set, you know, like a timeless standard for what really Eldar and Space Marines should look like, period. And I think the direction that GW's going with the Primaris is just like, you guys, where you've messed up is you've made them too detailed. The reason why Jess's Mark 7 models still stand up, they're easy to look at. They're fun to look at. They're, you know, like the Space Wolf down at the Blood Claw. Yeah, he's got crap all over his armor, but it's fun and easy to look at. Whereas
I know where you're coming from.
Modern Primaris models, like at least they simplified them versus the later plastic Mark 7s. But it's still like I hate painting Primaris. They're just not fun. It's just like there's too much going on their armor.
They're good looking models, and in terms of their quality as actual kits and the way they go together and all the rest of it, and then the way the equipment looks great and all, fantastic.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree that everything's become very fiddly. It's overwrought. I think it's that classic thing of just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. But you know, when you get so many of the digital sculpts these days, they've just got too much going on, too many layers of detail and fiddly detail that you don't need. And so it's actually changed the entire aesthetic of what a toy soldier, particularly a little miniature, is. And so they're very, you know, and sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. And I do think, you know, that's something that probably some of the designers don't understand, especially the younger. My understanding is they have like sort of 70 plus people designing there now.
Yeah. Well, like I've noticed, like with like I think Darren heads up a lot of the design team, and like I'll notice like there's like 5 people involved in making one model, and it's like the last guy's like, I sculpted the grenade.
Exactly. So I was talking to this again. It's a few years ago. I was talking to Dave Thomas, and so he does all the Horus Heresy stuff, and he was saying that basically for the Horus Heresy Marines, he basically does the pose. He's like, okay, I decide how it looks. I decide the pose and the anatomy and all the rest of it. Then it gets given to other guys, and they put rivets on and they put chains on it and whatever, or like the bits and pieces. But a lead designer is effectively making sure that the basis is all there.
While you were gone, it was right where I thought it was. I just didn't see it.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah. It was awesome.
I don't have the cover on it anymore.
That was a great cover.
That's the Space Marine rule.
It was a great cover. Yeah.
You keep bringing up Ivan and one of the other guys. The only reason why I know them is because of.
Yeah. Oh, they were awesome painters in their day, you know. Yeah.
And
that was the original for me. The golden era was that. So you've got basically Mike, Tim, Andy Craig, Ivan, Dale, and there were people on the periphery of that. So they weren't heavy metal, but studio people who did stuff like Phil Lewis or whatever. And I guess one of the greatest who never gets.
I snagged this for $70 last year, brand new.
Yeah, awesome! It is a great book, you know.
Oh, it's so funny because it's like so different back then.
Yeah, of course. But like, what's interesting, considering the success of Workshop and Warhammer, but really that means 40k. Like, it's Warhammer 40,000 is the vehicle for the success. So if you take that original Rogue Trader book and think, how on earth did this end up being what it is today? This juggernaut, this absolute world-conquering IP. It's incredible. And whatever the magic is about Space Marines, it's because of Space Marines, basically.
Yeah. Well, the one thing, like these old rule books and whatnot that I love so much is like just the silly campiness to it all. I mean, it was cool as hell back then because there was nothing like it, but at the same time, there were so many like stolen sci-fi tropes, and it was just so campy and silly. And you know, like there was one of the issues of modernish issues of White Dwarf I had when they brought out, I think, 5th edition 40K, 4th or 5th edition 40K. They were talking about like it was three of the game designers. They were talking about it in the article. Just they're like, oh yeah, Rogue Trader. God, there were so many inside jokes and just so much humor in Rogue Trader. You know, we weren't trying to make it this ultra serious thing. We just put a lot of our humor in there. And if you know what you're looking for, you'll see it. And it's nice to see Workshop now bringing back some humor, like how they have every single year they have the new Red Gobo miniature. And you know they've managed to like within 40K they've really brought the silliness back to the orcs, like they are literally the comic relief of the universe, where everything's so serious, and then here come the orcs, and it's just like they're just silly as hell. So I actually wanted I wanted to get into one more question, and your Instagram very briefly, but the question that I have for you, since you are so well experienced in this, and that's the last word in the sentence, what advice could you give painters just starting out to help them avoid the pitfalls you've experienced?
Yeah, okay. Just in general, in terms of painting?
I mean, just advice for youngins starting out. I mean, because you've been doing this for, God, almost, I think, as long as I have.
Yeah. I guess paint miniatures that you are interested in painting. Don't force, you know, that sounds obvious, but it's so easy to end up trapped in, I have to paint this for my game, or I have to paint this regiment, or I need to do 20 crossbowmen, even though I hate painting the crossbowmen. Just don't do it. If you want to become good at painting, focus on just painting whatever miniature appeals. Try to be diverse. So, you know, do a Space Marine, do an Eldar, do a Minotaur, do a Goblin, and just, you know, always be looking to try different things. So, I saw this great skin tone here, try it. I saw this great fur over here, try it. Yeah, as I said, back in the day when I was really starting out, I didn't finish a lot of figures because I'd do the bit I was interested in. I was like, I want to try this, whatever it was, Minotaur skin. And then, I've done that now, so what about this thing or whatever? But yeah, just focus on that. Learn, don't rush, but at the same time, don't over-labor them. I think I definitely went through a period where I was trying so hard to level up that it became laborious, and it became quite stressful, actually. You're almost like holding your breath with every brush stroke. Yeah. That's not fun. You know, you've got to enjoy it. But yeah, just keep plugging at different things and just go wherever the mood takes you, because then you're going to be enthused and inspired.
Well, okay then. And with that said, I'll stop announcing this because this is like the 34 episode in, but I've actually started cutting my Instagram portion fairly short and only talking about a few miniatures just because it was the least watched portion of the show. But for someone of stature and classic standing in all this, there was a few pieces that I did want to bring up. I was actually curious about this. Were these yours?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. So this is something I've got literally a folder on my desktop filled with this kind of stuff where these days, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, people paste old White Dwarf pages. And for me, it's just a great chance to actually start collecting all my old work. So anything I see, I just save the JPEG and post it or plan to post it. But yeah, I'd
love to see like more of like what you've collected as far as your own work, because I was again never quite sure on who did what in White Dwarf in that era. And I mean, oddly enough, I was actually looking at some of these the other night. One of my books, and I was wondered who painted it. So it's actually nice to know that these were yours. And I mean, to kind of go along with this, you posted your more modern ones.
That was still, but even those, I would have painted those in about 2003 or 4.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, I was actually referencing these the other night when I was putzing around with my Ultramarine, my test Ultramarine for my tutorial, and just like looking at the way you highlighted.
They were gorgeous models. They were beautiful.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I just Ultramarines were my thing. I loved them. and Space Wars, but Ultramarines were, number one.
Yeah, I remember I ran across this page and I saw your models and I'm like, oh my God, he's still got it. This is so awesome. I'm glad he kept painting.
I'm not sure I could quite do that anymore. But.
And then just a more modern.
That's more recent
for the youngins watching.
Yeah, that was a few years ago, but yeah, my eyes aren't what they were, unfortunately.
Well, the cool thing is that's still painted in your own Grimbright style.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's just difficult.
And there was where is he? Where'd he go? No. Where the hell is it? There we go. Yeah, that bad boy. I got to throw that. I got to this out for my buddy Steve.
I really enjoyed that, especially the claws, and especially I'd grown up with the Tim Prow version being the studio version, and so when I was asked to paint this, I was like, wow, I've got to outdo that. And I think that was kind of cool. Is
that the one from the studio?
It was, yeah. That's the
okay. So that's the one in your article.
Yeah, but that's so that was done after, the Tim one was done when Tyranids first came out, and this was done for the Tyranid Codex. And that happened occasionally, but when it did happen, it was really great because it was, imagine you're an heavy metal painter and you get a chance to repaint some classic model. It was like, wow, it's my chance to, you try and outdo the original. So that was always kind of fun. But yeah, that's very old.
So how did you manage to smuggle that out of the studio?
It's just a photo. It's not the actual figure. No.
Oh, okay.
But that's it. Yeah, that's it. I wish I had these things, I saw, do you remember the yellow Gargant figure?
The Orc Gargant?
Orc Gargant?
Yeah, from Titan Legions.
Titan Legions. Yeah. So that's one of mine. I painted that.
Oh, wow.
And this was the back end of last year. I don't know, someone posted something about it on Facebook or something, and I made some comment, and I said, "Hey, I painted the original one." And then some guy messaged me, he's like, "Yo, you mean this one?" And he's literally got that figure, and it's on a display base with he won it in a prize via Workshop. So Workshop are like giving stuff away basically, but it's nice that it's still out there. But again, it's like 30 odd years old. I would have painted that in what?
Who painted the Imperator?
97. Oh, the Emperor Titan, the red one. That was Neil Hodgson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then Stuart Thomas did a black one.
God, I wish I could get my hands on one of those.
Yeah. So for the Titans, I did. And I literally saw someone talking about this the other day because someone online was posting about the old metal Titanicus figures. But then there was a Warlord Titan sculpted by Dave Andrews, which was very square.
Yeah, that was the second. Yeah, the one that came out in the later 90s.
Yeah. So I did that. That was still in the original color scheme. So the red carapace and the black and white hazard signs on the legs or whatever. But then after that, when they did Epic 40K
and the big green one,
Titan that looked more like that was me. So that was the one that looked like a battleship. That was mine as well. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So again, you see a very different take on things. Even within that short space of time, he'd gone from that bright red kind of to the green battleship style.
Yeah, boy. Space Wars was my favorite faction. So.
Yeah, I do like them. There's something about the Space Wolf Grey. And I can never see beyond Tim's, to be honest. There's something about the way he painted them that was fantastic.
Honestly, like one of the biggest influences to my painting style was Kim Seiberg. And like how he managed to lay plays like that back in the 90s, like with those paints is just beyond me.
Yeah, he was awesome. Like, his painting was just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, there was actually the last one I wanted to pull up was your old Dark Angels captain. I love that model.
Yeah, I think what a classic figure. And I know they remade it, didn't they? And it just doesn't work.
Yeah, they resculpted him, and it was a metal resculpt. I actually have it, and he's got like a cape over his other arm.
Yeah, it's just too chunky. And
it was that was actually the last model I tried to paint before I stopped in 2012. I got mostly done with it. I'll dig it out after the show and show it to you, but. It never dawned on me that it was a resculpt of this until like recently. I was like, oh,
yeah. But I think it's that going. You were talking about the simplicity. So there's something about the simplicity of the earlier models, and especially with Jez's stuff, he just had just something about the proportions and the posing that just really, really work. And so that remake of this just doesn't quite. And then, a few years ago when they remade the Chaos Warrior, the Slambo Chaos Warrior, and it just doesn't work. It's just not the same. It's, the anatomy is different, the pose is different, it's too chunky somehow.
Well, yeah, everything now is like is correct anatomy, whereas like the old '90s models, it wasn't always. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, the Terminator captain from way back in the day, the anatomy on that's terrible. The first metal Logan Grimnar, his anatomy, his head's in his chest, and from what 80 told me, that was not Jess who sculpted that. Like he doesn't know who sculpted it, and nobody can figure it out. But the old heroic style sculpting was just, it's not anatomically correct, but it just looks fun. It looks good. My biggest gripe about any even the Space Marines now is like how small the hands have gotten.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's so annoying. Like you look at like Imperial Guard and like Sisters of Battle, and their hands are all itty bitty and dainty. It's like, but what happened to them having big old manly hands back in the 90s?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this is, again, going back to the idea that everything, not the idea, but the fact that everything's done digitally now. You imagine if you're a designer and you're sat there and you've got some like 36-inch monitor, and you're there sculpting the figure. It must look awesome at that scale and that size.
Oh yeah, because you can zoom into like really 1,000%.
Yeah. But when you take that down to whatever it is now, 32 mil or whatever, all of a sudden it's way too fine, it's too detailed.
Yeah.
And I think they have lost some of that dynamic of, as you say, it was about big feet, big hands. Mm-hmm. Why? Well, because you needed the hands big enough to hold that big chunky weapon. The reason for the big chunky weapon was that it cast more easily and didn't bend.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. There was a whole reason that the aesthetic around Citadel miniatures developed in the way it did.
Well, there was a whole video I watched. It was a video essay like 25 minutes long of this guy comparing modern sculpting of 40K miniatures, especially Imperial Guard, the more humans, even the Eldar, compared to the 90s. And his biggest bone of contention and his biggest point was the way that the miniatures in the 90s were sculpted. It was really easy to see everything on the tabletop. You could tell the Imperial guys, the Catachan jungle fighters were carrying las rifles. You could tell that the Sisters of Battle were carrying big bolters. You could easily see the weapon loadout on the tabletop because the proportions weren't 100% anatomically correct. And visually, it made more sense. It was easier to see. It made people happier, or it made the brain happier. Whereas now, like you see a Space Marine with a plasma pistol, and the thing is like absolutely tiny in his hands. Whereas the old plasma pistols, they were big chunky things, and they were like, oh, he's got a plasma pistol, and it's really easy to see. Where it's like, you look at your Space Marine 2 feet away. Is he holding a bolt pistol? Is he holding a las pistol? Is he holding a plasma? He's got little little things in the back. It's a plasma gun. So,
no, I understand what you mean, 100%. Yeah.
But
don't get me wrong, I love the new stuff, but
to wrap the show up, and I stay on because I want to chat with you afterwards. But to wrap the show up, is there anybody you would like to give shout outs to? And it doesn't have to be 300 people. It can be like your cat and your wife.
Yeah, I guess. Well, to my buddies, basically, my gaming group here. So Josh, Steve, Jack. And then back in Nottingham, still close friends with Jez, Ben Jefferson, John Wigley, Matt Parks. They're my boys. So,
okay. Yeah. And if to round out the show, I have a new thing. It's not new anymore, but I have a thing where every guest leaves a mystery question for the previous guest. So your previous guest left you the question of, what's the worst purchase you've made in the hobby? At 30 years in, there's a lot of those.
Yeah, good Lord, I don't know. I can't answer that. It must be some box set or something I've purchased. I don't know. Probably going all the way back, Dark Future. I don't know why I bought it. I bought that game. Yeah, I bought it and I opened it and I was just like, "What? This isn't for me." No,
I remember when Dark Future was still sitting new on the shelves, man.
Yeah, I know. That was a weird one.
There's like a whole following now behind that game. That like guys are actually sculpting new models for it and all kinds of stuff. Like you can download 3D STLs for it and have new cars and new weapon loadouts. And there's like new rules and all kinds of crap for it. So it's interesting to see that.
It had a following. It did have a following, didn't it? Yeah.
And that was really, God, that was one of their very first box games.
Yeah, right up there with Adeptus. So I think all of the same era was Blood Bowl. It would have been the 3rd edition, Blood Bowl, Adeptus Titanicus, Dark Future, and that was a real.
Third edition Blood Bowl, was that the one with the styrofoam playfield?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you had the red box set and the brown box set in the very old small format, and then they did the first big box set that had the styrofoam thing.
So the fourth edition is the one that like in the mid '90s.
Yeah, with all the Gary Morley range. Yeah,
I've still got mine.
Yeah, which
I love Blood Bowl.
Yeah, that was huge. I wasn't involved in terms of playing because like the studio went crazy. I mean, just go online. There's so many interviews with people about that era and Blood Bowl, but the whole studio just went insane playing Blood Bowl at Latch Breaks.
Oh, it was so stupid. It was fun. Like I'm not into gaming whatsoever. Like Space Hulk and Blood Bowl are really the only two games I've ever played. And I mean, Space Hulk for the simplicity, you cannot beat Space Hulk. But Blood Bowl, it was just fun and stupid, and all the silly rules that they made up for it. It was just such a cartoony game. There was no seriousness in it whatsoever. So
yeah, it's good stuff. It's really good stuff.
But I'm going to end the show, but like I said, stay on. I want to chat with you a little bit afterwards. Thank you, Dave, very much for coming on. It has been an absolute honor to get to talk to you and hear your stories, dude. Like it just kind of for me, it's a dream come true because like you were one of the guys I grew up idolizing. So
misplaced youth. Huh? But yeah, thanks so much. Great to chat.
Man. Yeah, man. I'm going to switch over to the ending screen. Here's a couple more episodes or videos. Maybe by this time the Ultramarines tutorial will be out. I don't know, but yeah, here's a couple more things. If you want to go watch them, and I'll talk to you guys in a bit. Thank you for tuning in.